Two results from last night's strike on Venezuela. One, the American military might was flexed. And two, the American people will be largely perplexed. Let's get into it.
Military power, air, land, and sea was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II.
Before we go too much further, my name is Casey. I have been a husband, therapist, conservative man, and father for more than a decade, and I am concerned that regime change could be a bridge too far for a crappy leader. But if you'd like to take the bridge to a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom in America, please like, share, and subscribe on the way in. Let's get into what happened in Venezuela and why Trump might just put us 20 years into another country's nonsense.
All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military working with U.S. law enforcement successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night.
More is being revealed about the rationale for the strike on Venezuela yesterday, but I am mostly concerned as a pretty much non-interventionist. I actually was against the Iraq war in the first place. I am concerned that we're going to get in a quagmire, and the spread of the democracy as the highest standard for what other governments should be doing is not necessarily working. And a lot of people don't take the demos, the people, the will of the people, as their foremost idea of what a good political structure looks like. And that includes many of these countries in South America, which have been communist historically and just generally tyrannical. Switching them over to a democracy doesn't seem like the best use of taxpayer interests from the United States to Venezuela. However, it sounds as if in many of Trump's statements, he is explicitly saying that the oil and other resource generation that will come out of a regime change in Venezuela will be paramount to part of the reasons why they did it. However, I am extremely concerned that Trump says they're just going to run the country until a new leader comes. Watch that.
So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious.
On the positive side, there are a lot of bona fides and a lot of plaudits that should go towards the American military. And looking at Pete Hegseth's little speech that he gave from the White House this morning, this is the most impressive man that we've had at the head of the military in the Department of War, and I personally give him a lot of credit. I think he looks like the leader that this country needs, and someone who's willing to overlook the naysayers in order to do what he sees as politically salient, and probably at the behest of Trump sees as the political action that this administration wants to take at this time. So Pete Hegseth, warrior, that he's just an excellent person to head the military. Watch a little bit from what he had to say.
Flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans our country has to offer. American warriors are second to none, the best in the world and the best of our country. What all of us witnessed last night was sheer guts and grit, gallantry, and glory of the American warrior. The president said, our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. Welcome to 2026, and under President Trump, America is back.
And then Secretary of State Marco Rubio is probably going to be the janitor in this situation. He is going to have to clean up the rationale, because Trump, it sounded more like a campaign speech than an actual rationale for why they did this action. He even started to talk about, ICE and other interventions in big cities having to do with the National Guard. That has nothing to do with why the Venezuelan leader was literally taken out with some constitutionality in question. So Secretary Rubio is going to have to clean this up and begin to make the case to the American people why this military operation and American lives were put at risk for the toppling of a regime, which we've done over and over, right? And whether it's Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan. A great many of these populations in these countries, while they may benefit from new leadership, that doesn't mean that our taxpayer dollars and American lives need to go towards risking everything in order to topple these poor leaders. So that's the question that Secretary Rubio is going to have to clean up. Watch a little bit about what he had to say.
He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognized him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward, which I guess we saved $50 million.
And then last but not least, some of the pundits that are making the case one way or the other, or at least analyzing the situation, and one that I deeply trust and put a lot of stake in, is a former military man named Nick Freitas. He gives a little oratory on what the situation might be, is it constitutional, and whether or not we should actually have done this in the first place. Watch a little bit about what he had to say.
That is, okay, well, what are you supposed to do if you do have a legitimate case where you have a leader that is, again, an illegitimate leader of their own country and actively engaging in what, I would argue that there's sufficient evidence to justify that he's actively engaging in subversive behavior toward the United States with respect to the cartels running in Venezuela and the importation of drugs into the United States. Trump. So essentially, the Trump administration just FAFO'd Maduro and the Venezuela regime. And so one of the first tweets that went out that, from someone I really respect is Mike Lee. And Senator Mike Lee, when all this was going on 6 hours ago, he put out, I look forward to learning what, if anything, might constitutionally justify this action in the absence of a declaration of war or authorization for the use of military force. And of course, there were some people that, I don't accept this false dilemma. I don't accept the false dilemma of, I have to, two things can be true at once. I cannot like Nicolas Maduro, just like I cannot like Vladimir Putin, just like I cannot like the Ayatollah. That doesn't necessarily mean I want the United States military to, go overseas and engage in a 10 to 20 year expedition to try to turn dictatorships into parliamentary democracies.
I would be naive if I thought that I knew everything about this situation that was politically savvy or politically expedient for the Trump administration to take this action. I think that he knows that a great many of his supporters are not wartime, they're not neocons. So we're not interested in regime change throughout the world, which was basically the boomer mentality stretched from the long 20th century until now. And so the great many of the pundits and people on Trump's side have been critical of Israel against Gaza and other foreign wars that we really didn't want to get into, along with the bombing of Iran. So is this going to be good for his administration? That is yet to be seen. It seems extremely like if you want to mess with America, you're going to get spikes nowadays. You're going to get retaliation. And I think that Trump is trying to make himself a non-lame duck second-term president in at least foreign affairs, because he does not want the foreign affairs departments and the other countries that are operating and really have been hurting us since the Biden administration and even prior to that. He does not want those countries to continue to F around and to continue to not have consequences for that. And so I think he saw this as aggressive but limited strike in a way that would give him clout to even try to maybe end some of the other major wars. But it could be an extremely risky endeavor to see what happens in Venezuela from this point forward, because if it goes really poorly and if the next regime is exploitative of the populace, that will be a black eye on the Trump administration. And while I don't think it will ruin his legacy, I do think it is a little bit of the 1990s Republican Party made manifest in 2025. And if you would like to make manifest a future that is better for our children, which is why I started this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. Put me out of a job as a therapist and psychologist, and I would happily just complain on the internet forever. Have a great day.